In the winter of a joint training exchange on the Brecon Beacons, a Delta Force operator with 3 combat rotations to Iraq and Afghanistan, a man who had survived a 40-mile-long walk, passed the Delta Commander Board, and completed the 6-month operator training course, spoke his safe word 11 hours into SAS tactical questioning after an interrogator calmly convinced him he had already revealed classified information that he had not actually disclosed. The operator later told debriefers he did not quit because of pain. He quit because he could no longer distinguish between what he had said, what he had imagined saying, and what the interrogator fabricated. Former SAS directing staff have a term for this moment: cognitive zero, the point where your own mind becomes the enemy and no amount of American training has prepared you to fight it. Selection is only the opening act of SAS preparation. Passing the infamous endurance marches and navigation tests earns a candidate a place on continuation training, a 20-week curriculum designed to turn raw grit into operational mastery. The course is divided into specialized modules, each demanding a different type of expertise. In the jungle phase, operators are dropped into dense, unfamiliar terrain, forced to adapt to relentless humidity, unseen threats, and the constant breakdown of equipment. Demolitions training follows, where precision replaces brute force, and a single miscalculation can end a career or a life. Signals instruction immerses candidates in the world of encrypted communications, electronic surveillance, and rapid silent information transfer, skills that mean survival behind enemy lines. Each module is taught by directing staff who expect not just technical proficiency, but the ability to integrate these disciplines under pressure. The pace is relentless. Days blend into nights with little rest, and mistakes are neither forgotten nor forgiven. By week 15, candidates have operated in multiple climates, mastered weapons and explosives, and learned to disappear in plain sight. Yet, through all of this, the most decisive test still lies ahead. Combat survival is reserved for the final phase. Its placement is deliberate. Only after mastering every tool, every tactic, and every deception are operators exposed to the one environment where none of these skills guarantees success: captivity. Here, the challenge is not physical endurance or technical knowledge, but the ability to protect the mind itself, a test that will determine who finishes the course and who is forced to walk away. The architecture of the SAS Combat Survival Syllabus is built on decades of hard-won insight into the psychology of captivity. In 1953, British analysts reviewing Korean War debriefs made a quiet but profound discovery. Prisoners subjected to prolonged stress and sleep loss often failed to distinguish real memories from suggestions planted by interrogators. This breakdown, later called source monitoring collapse, became the foundation for a new doctrine. Instead of focusing on physical suffering, the SAS would engineer conditions that targeted the mind's ability to separate truth from fiction. By the early 1980s, lessons from the Falklands campaign had sharpened this approach. After-action reviews documented the effects of sensory deprivation on captured personnel, how darkness, noise, and isolation could erode even the most disciplined mental routines. The SAS began trialing controlled sensory deprivation in training, not as punishment, but as a tool to simulate the true nature of captivity. Operators learned that disorientation, not brute force, was the real adversary. Legal boundaries were set in 1972 with the Parker Report, which established strict limits on the use of stress techniques. The recommendations from Parker, later codified in Ministry of Defense protocols, required that every method used in training be both operationally justified and medically monitored. These safeguards remain embedded in modern syllabi, shaping everything from the duration of interrogation to the mandatory inclusion of safe word protocols. Major Emma Holt, a current directing staff instructor, captures the ethos. Our goal isn't to break people. It's to show them how easily the mind can be manipulated under pressure, and to teach them how to recognize when it's happening. Today's classroom phase, with its rehearsed cover stories and role-played interrogations, draws directly from this lineage, blending psychological science and operational necessity into a system designed to test, and sometimes overwhelm, the very instincts that keep operators alive. Operators enter the cover story lab with little more than a dossier and a clock ticking down 48 hours. Each candidate is assigned a fabricated identity, complete with personal history, mission objectives, and a trail of plausible details meant to withstand scrutiny. What appears, at first, to be a simple paperwork drill is anything but. Every element is graded against the cover story. Integrity checklist, a matrix that measures plausibility, internal consistency, and resilience under cross-examination. Directing staff, acting as intelligence analysts, probe for gaps and contradictions, challenging operators to defend their narrative under simulated pressure. Role-play sessions mimic everything from hostile media interviews to interagency interrogations, each designed to introduce subtle flaws. Candidates rehearse their stories again and again, but the seeds of doubt are already sown. The room is not just a classroom. It is a controlled environment for capturing baseline physiological data. Over the course of the phase, heart rate variability, galvanic skin response, and cortisol levels are sampled and logged. These readings serve as a reference point, a snapshot of each operator's stress response before the real ordeal begins. By the end of the 48 hours, dossiers are sealed and baseline vitals archived. The operators step out not only with a memorized fiction, but with the knowledge that any error, any hesitation, will be measured against the data captured here. The mental trap is set. Soon, the field will strip away the comfort of the classroom, and the integrity of the cover story will become the only shield left between the operator and the mind of the interrogator. Operators step out into the Brecon beacons with a fictional identity, a ration pack, and clothing that feels one generation removed from World War II, wool, canvas, battered boots. The air is sharp, often wet, and the ground underfoot alternates between sodden peat and loose scree. Altitude rises and falls between 180 and 680 meters, forcing constant recalculation of every route. There is no comfort in the landscape. The hills offer only the illusion of concealment. Each candidate carries a GPS beacon and a passive RF tag, meant for safety, but also a silent reminder that every movement is being tracked by someone, somewhere. The designated search sector spans up to 70 square miles, a grid mapped with clinical precision. Spread across this expanse are 600 to 800 personnel, Royal Marines, infantry, RAF dog teams, and specialist trackers, rotating in overlapping shifts. Every path, every hollow, every stand of bracken is watched or soon will be. The scale of the hunt is impossible to ignore. Radio traffic crackles in the distance, and the sound of dogs carries on the wind. The operators know the statistics. More than 95% will be captured before the exercise is over. Some will make it a few hours, a handful might last a day, but most are found within minutes. The kit is deliberately minimal. Water, a single ration, a thin blanket for concealment, and the cover story committed to memory. No navigation aids beyond the map and compass. No radios. The clothing soaks through quickly, and the cold seeps in, numbing fingers and slowing thought. Each step is calculated not just for speed, but for silence, for the hope of leaving no trace. Yet, with every hour, exhaustion grows, and the certainty of discovery presses closer. The terrain offers no real escape, only the slow tightening of the hunter's net. The dread is not just of capture, but of what comes after. Operators move through the landscape knowing that the real test is not the run, not the cold, not the hunger, but the moment when the chase ends and the questions begin. Every sound in the distance, every shift of the wind, every unfamiliar silhouette on the ridge signals that the inevitable collision is drawing near. The ambush arrives without warning. One moment, the operators are moving through a narrow saddle, heads low against the wind, boots sinking into sodden ground. The next, a tracker's shout cuts through the dusk. Freeze! And the world contracts to a single command. In that instant, every survival instinct collides with the reality of overwhelming force. Two hunters close in from the north, rifles level, faces hidden behind balaclavas. The dog handler's canine strains at the leash, barking sharp and insistent. White breath clouds the air. The operator's heart rate jumps from a resting 72 to 138 beats per minute. There's a 3-second hesitation, then compliance. Hands raised, bodies still. The illusion of control dissolves. Hand-over-hand cuffing begins within 30 seconds. Cold metal snaps around the wrists, first one operator, then the other. The process is methodical. Each man passes the cuffs to his partner, a ritual designed to reinforce helplessness. The medical officer steps in, checks core temperature, 35.2 degrees Celsius, mild hypothermia already setting in. A salivary swab is taken, cortisol registering at 22 nanomoles per liter, double the baseline from the classroom phase. Heart rate variability has plummeted to 0.31. Every metric signals acute stress, but the mind lags behind, still processing the sudden loss of agency. Within minutes, the operators are bundled into the back of a four-wheel drive Land Rover. Hoods descend, plunging them into darkness. The vehicle jolts forward, bouncing over rutted tracks, each turn disorienting. White noise floods the cabin, 110 decibels, a featureless roar that erases any sense of time or direction. GPS signals vanish as the vehicle enters the underground shaft. The only constants are the pressure of the cuffs, the stifling heat beneath the hood, and the relentless static in their ears. By the time the doors open again, the operators have been stripped of every external reference point. The transition from hunted to captive is complete. The mind begins to fragment, not from pain, but from the impossibility of stitching together what just happened with what comes next. The tactical questioning cell is engineered for psychological precision, not spectacle. Operators are led one by one into a small, windowless chamber, bare walls, a single chair bolted to the floor, a harsh overhead light. The air hums with white noise, calibrated to 110 decibels, erasing the possibility of eavesdropping or orientation. Every surface is designed to absorb rather than reflect, flattening sound and space into a kind of sensory vacuum. Interrogators work in 2-hour shifts, each meticulously trained to sustain mental pressure without resorting to physical coercion. The workflow is governed by a strict protocol. 5 approved stress techniques, each introduced at specific intervals, each designed to destabilize without crossing into illegality. Sleep deprivation begins immediately. Light pulses and low-frequency noise keep operators from slipping into unconsciousness. Sensory overload follows, with strobe flashes at 10 Hz and the relentless static of white noise. Fluid intake is rationed to 250 milliliters per hour, monitored by a medical officer stationed behind a one-way mirror. Every 3 hours, a 15-minute respite is enforced. Operators are removed from the chair, given water, and checked for signs of physiological collapse. Then, just as the body begins to recover, the cycle restarts. The heart of the system is the introduction of contradictions. At 4 hours, 12 hours, and 24 hours, the interrogator weaves a fabricated inconsistency into the operator's cover story, details that challenge the foundation of what was rehearsed in the classroom phase. A radio frequency that was supposedly logged as Channel 2 is now claimed to be Channel 3. A vehicle registration number is said to mismatch the operator's account. The effect is cumulative. Each contradiction erodes confidence, forcing the mind to question not just the story, but the memory of having learned it. Captain Mark Davies, a veteran JSYO interrogator, describes the approach as precision disruption. The goal is not to extract information, but to induce a state where the operator can no longer distinguish between reality and suggestion. The environment is monitored in real time. Heart rate variability, EEG alpha-theta ratios, salivary cortisol, all logged against the clock. The process is clinical, methodical, and utterly relentless. Over 36 hours, the tactical questioning cell becomes a crucible where the mind, not the body, is the battlefield. American Special Operations training, from the earliest SARE programs to the current JSOC curriculum, is shaped by a fundamentally different philosophy. The United States model is built around 4 sequential stages: survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Each phase is structured to prepare operators for specific external threats: starvation, exposure, pursuit, and physical coercion by a hostile captor. The classroom instruction is direct and procedural. Candidates memorize the code of conduct, rehearse standardized answers, and drill the protocols for withstanding interrogation: name, rank, serial number, and nothing more. The emphasis is on resisting the enemy's efforts to break the will through pain, discomfort, and deprivation. Physical stress forms the backbone of the American approach. Sleep deprivation, cold water immersion, and controlled exposure to the elements are used to simulate the worst conditions a prisoner might face. Interrogation scenarios are scripted, with instructors following a playbook that escalates pressure within legal and ethical boundaries. The adversary is always external, a force to be resisted, a set of tactics to be endured. What is absent from this system is the engineered collapse of internal certainty. United States SIRI and JSOC pipelines rarely introduce deliberate contradictions into a candidate's own narrative. The focus remains on resisting the extraction of real information, not on manipulating the operator's memory or sense of self. There is no formal metric for source monitoring collapse, and the idea of a cognitive zero, a state where even elite operators cannot distinguish genuine memory from implanted suggestion, remains outside the American training doctrine. Safe word culture is also notably different. In the British model, a single word can halt the exercise and trigger medical intervention. In United States training, termination is generally at the discretion of medical staff, not the candidate. The American system is designed to test endurance against external pressure, not to probe the boundaries of internal reality. As a JSOC liaison once put it, "We teach our people to resist the enemy. The British teach theirs to resist themselves." Cognitive zero is not a metaphor. It is a measurable state induced by the deliberate architecture of tactical questioning. Over 36 hours, source monitoring, the mind's ability to separate real from imagined, memory from suggestion, decays in a pattern that can be traced on a graph. The index, which starts near 0.78 in the classroom, drops to 0.22 by the 12th hour in the cell. At this threshold, operators struggle to recall whether a detail was part of their original cover story or introduced by the interrogator. The process is monitored in real time. Heart rate variability plunges, cortisol doubles, and EEG readings shift into theta dominance, a neural signature of executive function breakdown. Inside the cell, the effect is cumulative and inescapable. Contradictions are not just presented, they are repeated, layered and reinforced until the operator's sense of narrative coherence dissolves. Even battle-tested Delta Force operators, men who have survived live capture and real-world interrogations, find themselves unable to trust their own answers. The physiological data tells the same story: a log linear decay in source monitoring index mapped against surges in stress biomarkers. By hour 24, confidence in factual recall falls below 30%. At this point, a fabricated photograph or a false radio log can be accepted as genuine. The mind, deprived of sleep and bombarded by sensory noise, loses the ability to separate what was rehearsed from what is being suggested. The consequences are not abstract. Operators who reach cognitive zero describe a sensation of internal collapse, a moment when the narrative they have built, the one thing meant to protect them, is no longer reliable. In the 2022 winter exercise, a Delta operator call sign Hawkeye triggered the safe word after experiencing this snap, repeating it 3 times in a row. The aftermath is stark. Among those who activate the safe word, clinical PTSD rates reach 31%, compared to 8% for those who endure to the end. The difference is not in physical harm, but in the shattering of self-trust, a wound that lingers long after the cell door opens again. Today, special operations units worldwide continue to refine techniques that target not just the body, but the mind's deepest architecture. As military selection evolves, the real crucible isn't measured in miles or bruises. It's the engineered collapse of certainty. When memory itself becomes unreliable, resilience demands a new definition. For modern operators, the battlefield now extends inward, and its boundaries are still being mapped.